You're listening to Behind the Lines, a podcast presented by In Play Live and powered by Pinnacle, the #1 sportsbook where winners play and never get limited. Go to pinnacle.com/InPlayLive to sign up and get in the game.
So you might not be hugely differentiated.
There might be some hosts here doing the same.
People copy my bracket every year, and I tell them before I post it.
Please don't, right?
I'm telling you, you are going to lose. Like, you are going to lose. But they don't listen.
All right, welcome in. It's Behind the Lines, powered by Pinnacle, purifying the sports betting industry. I'm Shane. There's Pace. And on today's show, college basketball. It's madness, the Trapezoid of Excellence. Yes, it's March, and we've got Ryan Hammer with us, a college hoops scientist, certified bracketologist, back here on the show. Ryan, we had you on last year around this time. It was an awesome episode. Our audience absolutely ate it up. So glad to have you back. How have you been?
I'm good. I'm happy to be here. I feel like it was just yesterday we were doing this, so it's good to be back, though.
Dude, we're so excited to have you back, and we're going to dive into everything March Madness. I'm really hoping that you know, for all of you out there tuning in, that this could really be a primer for you for the tournament, that you could use this to really sort of help build your brackets, inform your betting decisions throughout the tournament. That you're going to get everything you need from this episode. And Ryan, thanks so much for being here to do this with us.
Of course, I'm happy to.
All right. So, what have you been up to though over the past year? How is the college basketball season treating you so far?
It's been great. I say that every year, but truly, I feel like this year has been juiced up to the max in terms of like storylines and notable players and teams and stuff like that. It feels overall like better and more enjoyable. I think everyone would say that consensusly for this season compared to the last few years and really since the pandemic. But it's been good. I've been doing more things, been doing more on-campus stuff and YouTube stuff and interviews with guys and trying to expand my my world of content beyond the chart videos, which are also great. I'm still doing those, of course. But yeah, I'm just doing my best trying to grow my stuff. So
right, and you've been active in the betting space. I know when we had you on last time, you were working with FanDuel in some capacity. Are you still with them? Have you moved on?
So I've been independent I tell everyone I've been independent forever. I do some stuff every now and then with some brands and stuff, but still, as always, I've been independent. I actually don't classify myself as like a betting person either. I understand the gambling industry and everything like to the max. And I know that people use what I say for picks and stuff. I mean, it's very useful. But yeah, it's I'm independent.
Awesome. And I know, you say you don't bet, but I mean, betting's so big. I mean, you must throw together a bet here or there, especially when, you go to so many games. Do you ever throw down a wager when you're heading out to a game?
I do sometimes. Normally, if I'm home and I'm doing nothing is when I would versus when I'm going to a game.
Right.
Sometimes I'm just super busy also. And just like, I just don't like, I'm doing so much especially this time of the year that I don't want to do extra things because I want to make the right picks. So I want to analyze everything properly. But I have time to time. I think a lot of people have. So
yeah, fair enough. And I get it. You want to stay objective. But since you have thrown down some bets, is there any big hits you want to brag about? But before we get into everything, anything you want to share?
I mean, honestly, no. When I bet, it's very small scale and maybe a parlay for a few like underdogs that I like on the day or something like that. But I haven't really hit anything like crazy big this season, other than a couple of like small parlays, like I said.
Right. Okay, we're gonna dive into everything, and guys, I promise you the Trapezoid is coming. Just hang tight. We're gonna get into it. We're gonna dive into all things Trapezoid because I know that's what a lot of you out there want to see and want to hear about. But I got to ask you before we sort of get into sort of the nitty gritty of it, Ryan. We're in conference tournament time. A lot of moving and shaking going on throughout this week, and all leading up to Selection Sunday. How much do you see your rankings, metrics, your methods perhaps changing through the week here?
Not a ton.
Okay.
People that know what's going on, especially with how the bracket's going to get seeded and set up, conference tournament week means a lot less than people expect. I think it's very enjoyable, and it's like the beginning of March for the majority of casual fans around really, I guess, the countries and world, whatever. But the seeds aren't going to change a ton unless a team goes on like a crazy run or a team is like really the bubble teams are where I look at, the teams that are just in, just out, and they have to win 2 games or they can't lose their first game, et cetera, and stuff like that. And that's kind of really the biggest jostling for position. And of course, there are other things like Florida and Alabama fighting for a 1 seed and stuff like that. But nothing will change drastically for sure.
Okay. Go ahead, Pace.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. It actually makes me think about last year. So last year, we sort of head into the conference week where, we thought we had a bit of a clear picture, and I think it was the highest stolen tournament bids of all time because of what transpired in this week. So I know that probably didn't change a lot when it came to the actual trapezoid, because that actually made the teams that maybe even had a chance or were closer to it maybe even a little bit less likely, whereas these other teams that filled in weren't even on our radar. And then obviously UConn took care of things. But last year, did you see a change after this week because of what I just mentioned, or no?
Not a ton. So in terms of the bracket, yes, like how the bracket gets set up, because obviously you're kicking out 5. There were 5 Steelers last year who, like you're right, Pace. It was crazy, historically record, whatever. It kicked 5 bubble teams out. It kicked Seton Hall, Indiana State, teams like that out of the tournament. St. John's last year. But in terms of like rankings, like metric rankings and like the trapezoid you guys are talking about, and KenPom ratings, even whatever, they won't change that much from that. Of course, like it makes you look deeper, I think, beyond the surface into more layers for teams. Like when NC State went on their run, 5 games, 5 wins, 5 days, it makes you look at them more and be like, okay, we're on to something. They're on fire. So what are they good at? And then it makes you look beneath the layers. But I don't think anything that wasn't already previously there.
Okay, so on that same note, let's just take Duke, because obviously they're at the top of every ranking and every metric you could possibly look at right now. If they don't win the ACC, do we care?
No, as long as they don't lose their first game, that's all. That's all that matters.
Okay, so again, this is where I struggle with that rationale, and this is separate from obviously the data that you're going to present and show us. But do they not want to win this freaking tournament? Do they not want to win the ACC? And then if they didn't, does that not give us some sort of peek into their clutch factor, or do they just not care?
No, there's a layer of that, and obviously it's situational. Like if they lose like by 20, whatever in the semi, like that's obviously a problem. But assuming they don't, it's not that bad. And I think they're going to play Wake or Carolina most likely in the semis, and then probably Louisville or Clemson in the finals. The ACC not being great doesn't help what I was saying. It does, because like what you're saying, if they lose to a team in the ACC, it's probably not great, unless it is Clemson or Louisville realistically. But I think you play so many games in your conference, right? You're playing like close to 20 games sometimes in your conference against those teams a year, like for the entire season. You play most teams 2, and some teams, if not 3 times, when you play them in the tournament. So I think like if take Carolina, for example, they need to win to get in. They need to win a game. They need to win 2 or 3 games to get in. So if they come against Duke in the semis and they crunch one out in a really tight game, even though Duke swept them on the season series cleanly, like dominated them, if Carolina finds a way to win that game, I don't look at that and say, you know what, Duke's in trouble, because it's the 3rd time they're playing Carolina. Carolina's on life support, like situations like that where I like am just like whatever. I don't really care as long as Duke doesn't look like miserably awful.
Right. Okay, so then on that same note, maybe a better conference example is obviously going to be the SEC. So all eyes on the SEC this week. We just saw Alabama beat Auburn in overtime, and obviously there's a lot of hype around Auburn. How important is that SEC championship for these top four SEC teams that are obviously filling up the rankings here?
Yeah, it's big for a few of them for seeding. When you look at, like I mentioned before, Alabama and Florida are battling for a 1 seed. So if one of them wins the tournament and the other one doesn't, that's pretty conclusive that they'll get the 1 seed, and the one that wins gets the 1 seed. Team like Auburn is kind of in the same situation as Duke, where they're going to get a 1 seed. They're going to get either the overall one or the second one, and it doesn't really matter that as much. So they're not really playing for a ton, as crazy as that might sound. But it's situational for teams where everyone's playing for seed lines. Ole Miss has dropped a lot. Mizzou has dropped a lot. So they need to, I think, also showcase a winning ability, because like Mizzou, for example, I think they've lost the last 3 or 4 after being so hot before that. So teams like that, I think trying to get back on the right track is what their tournament is so important for.
Right. And then can a team like Kentucky, who's obviously been just a historic, March team, blue blood, can they kind of work their way back into I guess people's top of mind for their building their brackets with this SEC tournament, or are you writing them off?
I'm not writing them off. I don't write any of the SEC teams off there. I mean, they're like, the conference has been crazy. I see 4, 5, 6, 7 teams who can make like deep runs. Kentucky is going to be very, very, very matchup dependent because they have just been like up and down the entire season. They're more up right now, which is obviously good for them. They've also had injury issues. But I think to make them a key part of someone's bracket, if they're looking at, I'd watch Kentucky these next few games on a neutral floor, a team that is completely made up of brand new players. And this is a very important week to watch for fans to watch a team like Kentucky for sure.
Okay, so perhaps the conference tournament week is bigger for some of the teams that aren't at the very top, where we can see how they perform in these clutch situations to see if they can make a bit of a run for our brackets.
Yeah, I'd say anyone that you have questions about. I think it's a personal thing too, right? Like if someone is out there and says, I've seen enough of Kentucky, I love them, then you're going to roll with Kentucky, and that's fine. I have mixed feelings in them personally, so like this is a week where I'm watching them. Kansas has been so up and down. I'm watching Kansas this week. I'm watching UCLA, like exactly to your point, like teams that have won 27, 28 games, like are close to it. You know what you're getting from those teams at the top, and for the most part, unless they lose right away or lose really badly, like we kind of said. So.
Cool.
Yeah. So
good stuff.
Ryan, if I'm hearing you correctly, this conference tournament week is more about some of these other teams outside the top 10, maybe even outside the top 20, and sort of seeing how they perform against some of the tougher competition to get a sense of how deep into the big tournament could they go.
Yeah, 100%. And people always fall in love with the teams that are red hot and they win their conference tournaments. Auburn was a team last year. I'm like, it's hard to gauge the value of them losing that first round game because it was so like outlier and chaotic and like the Chad Baker-Mazara ejection and stuff like that. And then there's also, I think it was either 2 or I guess 3 years ago at this point, Iowa was red hot going into the tournament with Keegan Murray, and then Richmond was also red hot, and people counted out Richmond. Iowa was the hottest team in the country. They lost first round. Like people get caught up in the teams like that are just on absolute fire rolling through these conference tournaments, and then they just get stifled round one. So
yeah,
you're reminding me of my bracket from last year, Ryan. I had Auburn. I didn't know Ryan, so I did an all SEC. Like I just basically went, SEC's got the stacked conference. They got some of the best teams. Let's just take SEC teams to beat everybody. And I think by the second round, well, by Auburn losing, I'm already eliminated. But you're still thinking, okay, well maybe I was onto something. No, not even close, right?
That's all, but that's what the fun of it all is, though, right? And you play your strategies, and then you watch them sort of go down in a ball of flames.
That's actually a good question for you, Ryan. Do you think there's ever an edge to a conference like what I just brought up? Which obviously I was like, I should have bet the complete opposite. But do you think like you go, oh, the ACC's obviously this isn't the best example for this year, but the ACC is the strongest conference overall. So because of that, they play in their own bubble. They're much better schools as a result, and they're the teams that are more likely to go forward throughout the entire bracket. Do you ever think that way or no?
I usually don't. As long as teams have shown against good quality opponents throughout the year, no matter whatever conference that be in. So like obviously Duke playing the ACC. ACC is not good, but they beat Auburn earlier in the year, and they beat whoever, I forget who else they played and stuff. But they played Kentucky, I think, and Kansas. Like they played good teams the entire season to prove that. And I look in style more than anything else. So like the SEC, the glaring issue with the SEC is like it's a ton of offense, and it's a ton of go, and a lot of fast-paced teams for the most part. So when they play against Big East teams or a nasty Big Ten team like Michigan State, like they're going to have, those teams might have problems in those games where I think other conferences, maybe it's tough. The Big 12 hasn't been like amazing, but I think personally, at least the Big 12 and the ACC is a good example. They have a good balance of everything. Something that sets you up for adaptability. And like we talk about the trapezoid, you guys love that so much. I know that's where that theory comes into play, where like you're adaptable to different styles, and some of the SEC teams, a lot of them aren't. So that's why they haven't been able to like crack that code. So.
Yeah,
right.
You made us a very special trapezoid for us just for this show, so I can't wait to share that with people. But before we move on from the KenPom rankings that I'm showing here on the screen, so if you're just listening to audio, just know that we've been showing the KenPom rankings here as we've been going through it. The KenPom rankings, I want to get your take on it because it is kind of like the definitive guide to who's who in college basketball. But I know that, some people out there tend to kind of disagree, or they have their own rankings and that kind of thing. Where do you fall with the KenPom rankings? Do you look at it like a college basketball Bible, or do you sort of maybe disagree? And do you find yourself disagreeing with it consistently?
A little of both. No, I definitely don't look at it as a Bible.
Okay.
I use it as like a kind of how the committee uses the net ranking, where like to seed teams, and the net ranking is bad in a lot of ways. So maybe it's not a great example, but I use KenPom as like a sorting tool almost. That's what people all call it. Like where I say, if you ask me how good is somebody and I have no idea who they are, I'll look at them on KenPom, but great, they're 280th. They're awful. They're not good no matter what. And not to say whoever's 280 is terrible, but I have no idea what it is. But to my point, like I use it as like a blanket understanding, as like a high level on the surface kind of view of a team. But to your point, like I disagree with so much of it, because teams who have 14 losses, Ohio State's a great example. Ohio State is not that good. They're not very good. They're 17-14. They should have the way that they're going to get into the tournament, I think, which should not happen. But they're going to find a way to get in with 15 losses, most likely, because of things like KenPom. And I understand it's math, and I'm a math and data guy, but there are some rankings like this that I just can't get behind sometimes with teams like that. That's very, very nitpicking and situational, though.
Yeah. Just for reference, Alabama State sitting at 280.
Yeah. There you go.
So there we go. Okay. Well, let's bring up the trapezoid, because that's what we've been sort of teasing throughout the beginning of the show here, and that's what I think the people really want. So Ryan, you explained this last time you were on our show or about a year ago, right around this time a year ago. But for everybody out there who maybe didn't see that show or isn't familiar with what you do, tell us about what the trapezoid is and how it works.
Yeah, so the Trapezoid of Excellence is it's a data chart basically that shows every team. It's a metric, I guess, in a way, that tries to predict future champions of the NCAA tournament and March success in general. So the trapezoid itself is it paced by net rate, overall efficiency and net rating. So basically the theory is the faster you play or the slower you play, the better you have to be at that one style to be able to succeed at the highest level and win a national championship in March Madness, in the NCAA tournament. And it uses historical champions from the last 5 years to make the trapezoid so that it's always also adapting for the game, but it uses historical proof and it has not been broken yet. I also use this chart, the way I discovered it, I use this chart for things other than to find a champion like that. I use, like, look, you pulled it up, you see Alabama out there all the way on the right and like Drake all the way on the left. I use it for situational matchups to find differences also, because the teams like Alabama that play so fast, like you're not choosing between just the trapezoid teams in your bracket. You're choosing Alabama and Kentucky and New Mexico and Drake and maybe North Texas, whatever. Like you're choosing a lot of the teams that aren't in there. So there's other ways to use it beyond that. But the overall essence of it, the theory of it is that you have to be adaptable to different styles to be able to win a national championship. And that's been proven. So.
Yeah. And I mean, look, I think you had UConn for the past couple of years high up in the bracket, and we saw how they performed. Okay. So let's start with Duke in the trapezoid, high up in the trapezoid, right sort of in the middle of the trapezoid as well. And of course, they are at the top of the KenPom rankings, as we just saw. I mean, have you seen a team like this in recent memory?
In terms of metrics and net rating, no. Definitely not. And they have just been unbelievable this entire season. But in terms of eye test, I think there have been a few teams that are better. I think that attests to the overall level of the game and analytics and kind of modernizing everything within coaching staffs and programs, because if you look at Auburn and Houston also, they're also two of the highest ranked teams in metric and data history. So it's not just Duke, it's entirety of the sport kind of being elevated. And I think teams know how to manipulate analytics and things better now to get the most efficient style and play out of them. And you can say that for even mid-major teams like VCU and UC San Diego that are up there, near the trapezoid. But they've been incredible. They're one of the better teams, the best teams in recent memory for sure. But like I said, I think there have been a couple of better teams on the eye test, and I'm not like fully confident like it's Duke and nobody else has a chance to win.
Okay, but if you were building a bracket today, would you have Duke winning it all?
Yeah, it'd be stupid not to. I go against my mind. I go against my mind a lot. I go with my heart, and I would try to find a way to not do it, but I don't know how I wouldn't. So
yeah, fair enough. I mean, so there. I guess the other side of this then is that everybody out there sees them at the top of the Ken Palm. Now they're seeing them sort of, as the strongest team within the trapezoid here. They're probably going to be the big favorite for the tournament. Everybody's going to have them winning it all. So let's look at some of the other teams in the trapezoid. Where would we start looking if we want to start looking at teams to knock off Duke, or at least, outperform them throughout the tournament?
Yeah, I think you got to look at teams that play at the highest level possible, and then there's other factors beyond this, of course. So obviously, the highest level, you have teams like Houston, Auburn, Tennessee, Maryland, Florida, Texas Tech, etc., that are in there. But I think you got to look at style. Duke plays a crunch down game. They play ridiculously blistering defense, and they're big and they're athletic and they're energetic and stuff like that. So Auburn fought them pretty well. I think the Auburn could get them for sure. I think Florida would be a huge test, I guess, but it'd be like an Elite Eight or Final Four game. I think that'd be a huge opportunity for Florida because of Florida's size and depth in the front court, and their versatility in the front court. I think that's a team that could definitely do some damage against Duke. It's tough. I don't see a lot of teams being able to beat them. Maybe Michigan State could dogfight them, but I think Duke would be fine in that game. And I think Houston plays kind of similarly, and that would be a nasty game and a true dogfight. But because they play almost as well, similar style at times, I think that could be a potential one too.
When we're looking at this and we look at the trapezoid and we see those slower teams there and Houston, Tennessee, kind of looking at those, that section of the bracket on the slower side, the defensively oriented teams. Do you are they capable of slowing down those faster paced teams or perhaps those average paced teams?
Yeah. I mean, yes, depends who it is. Obviously, like Alabama is going to play fast no matter what. When Alabama played Houston back in Vegas, I think it was in the 80s or something like that. I forget if they went to overtime or not, but Alabama kind of opened the game up a little bit and forced Houston into that kind of style. But 99% of teams are not Alabama. They're Kentucky, Illinois, and Michigan and stuff like that. Yes, but it's not super simple. I think when you play slow and defensive-minded, and you're at such a high level like Houston is, sure, because obviously their system, if you watch it, like it's ridiculous. It's impossible to break, almost impossible. When you look at teams closer to Tennessee and St. Mary's and where UConn and Clemson are, and then over to Drake, those teams tend to have lower ceilings in the tournament. When they play that style, but not at like an elite level, they can 100% do some damage, but they tend to, as a group, generally have lower ceilings in the tournament.
Okay. So let's go then to the faster side, Florida, Auburn, and Alabama, just off the charts fast, like way faster than the rest, as you kind of just alluded to there. Are those faster teams, like you sort of just mentioned the game between Houston and Alabama, where Houston was forced to play fast. Are those faster teams? Are they generally able to force those slower teams to keep pace with them? Like, is that more of a trend?
I think it's usually the vice versa when you get teams at like comparable paces on opposite sides of the spectrum and similar levels. That's like very rarely going to happen where you're going to have a perfect balance, obviously. Yeah. But it's easier to think, if you think about it, it's easier to slow a game down within your control than speed up a game within your control. Because if you force yourself to speed up the game when it's not going that way, you tend to turn the ball over more and make more mistakes and little tiny mistakes. And then if you make a mistake, you come down the other way and the team takes 30 seconds on the shot clock and they get a bucket. That's demoralizing. And that kind of slows the game down a little bit. But a team like Alabama, for example, obviously like had like historical pace, high pace. It's actually crazy. They're going to speed up the game against 99% of teams and be fine. But teams like Kentucky, Illinois, if they played a Houston or something like that, I think it would be a lower scoring game than they normally play in.
Right. Okay. So when you go to the extreme side, that's where you can sort of force other teams to keep up with you. But once you kind of get more closer to the middle, it becomes a bit of a toss up.
Yeah, history says that the slower it tends to favor the slower teams. All things even otherwise. So.
Right. Okay. Now, looking at all the teams in the trapezoid here, they're basically all top 10 on the KenPom ranking, except Maryland, sitting right over here at sort of the right side of the trapezoid there. Talk to me about this team, currently ranked 13th. What kind of shot do you think they have?
At a national title, probably zero.
Wow.
I'm a Maryland fan. I don't know if y'all know that, or if I've ever told you that, but I'm a passive Maryland fan that people most of my audience knows about now and stuff. But I grew up I take that out of the equation. I think they're very good. They're very dangerous. They're very well built to do some damage in March. Their lack of depth is an issue, but not like a glaring issue that I'm like super worried about, because they've been fine the entire season. They play a really good style they have two big mismatch. That's a problem. They have a guard and two shooting wings that are awesome. They defend like crazy. They defend very intelligently. They don't foul, and they push the floor in transition. So I think they have a great style that could do damage in the tournament, especially when you consider great, they're one of the top 7 or 8 teams here. They're 13 on KenPom, but they're going to end up getting like a 4 or 5 or maybe even 6 if all things considered seed or something like that. And I think that's a good opportunity to use the trapezoid and be like, wow, Maryland is underseeded based on everything. So depending on who they get, if they have the right matchups, they could do some damage for sure.
Okay, so you think they can do some damage. You just sort of said they're great, but you started off by saying they have a 0% chance at winning a title.
winning a national title and going to like a Final Four are two. People, I don't think people get that they're so far apart from each other, those two things. And it sounds crazy because you're like, oh, like San Diego State was in the national championship game. I was at that game with 100% confidence that UConn was winning that game. Like before the game started, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just like you get game after game after game, and you're playing the better opponent hypothetically and theoretically as you go on in the tournament. But there's a massive difference between winning a national title and going to a Final Four or succeeding in general in March. So as a Maryland fan, I'm telling you they can go to a Final Four, but they will not win the national championship.
Wow. What gives you such certainty there? And give me it, because, yeah, I think you're right. I think me and a lot of other people who sort of follow college basketball and perhaps pay much closer attention to all the storylines and all the drama as it unfolds sort of now in March, in the middle of March. Talk to me about this disconnect between a team that can go to the Final Four, but simply, you think has no shot at winning the championship. Why is there such a big gap there?
I think in the end, there are certain things that kind of roll through in terms of like draft experience and roster continuity or overall experience. Honestly, a lot of it is just trust in history and trust in historical proof. And I have learned so much in doing all this for the last few years. I've learned more and more every year, and I've gotten to a point last year really and then into this year that I'm just like, I know at the end one of the best teams are going to win. I have to just trust what I've been seeing is so consistent year after year after year after year.
Wow. Yeah, because I would think that, if a team can get to the Final Four, in my mind, they could win it all just because they got there. But you're saying absolutely not the case.
Depends on who it is, obviously. Yeah. But like I said, that year, San Diego State, FAU, Miami, it was UConn. One of my friend that I was with, he can attest to it. We went to the Final Four on the plane. I told him UConn's going to clean through this so easily, obviously.
Yeah. Okay. We've sort of been in the trapezoid, and I want to get out of it in just a moment. But within the trapezoid here, who would you take to win it all if you can't take Duke?
I think Florida is my sleeper a little bit. I like the way they play. I think they're very reliable against any style of team because of that depth and athleticism. I see how Duke defends with their size, and I think Florida has something similar. And they got two and a half, really two killers at the guard spot. But they got a couple of extra guards that they can roll into the rotation also. So I think they have a really good recipe for winning also.
Okay, Ryan, we gotta get historic here on the trapezoid before we move on from it. Sure. So have you ever missed?
No, this is how it started, where when I was first looking, when I think of like charts to metrics to look at, I will just like, when I'm watching a game or I have like a thought in my head, and I'll go fact check myself on these charts and kind of spit out the images and stuff. And I was curious about pace a couple of years ago, or maybe it was early last year, and I went in to look at this and I looked at historical champions. That's how the green shape became. I was like, wow, like UVA 2019 was so slow, but they played at such a high level. So like they were the upper left on that, going on that kind of incline towards the left. And when I created the shape, I was like, oh, it's funny, it's a trapezoid, because like, and I was like, that kind of makes sense, and I kind of went about that. So it uses historical champions. So no, it has not yet. But Alabama, I'm scared. I'll be honest.
Okay, so when you talk about historical champions, like how far back do you go to build to look at previous seasons where the champion's fallen in here? Like how many years back have you made this for?
I do 5 years so that it can adjust for any changes in the game. If the sport is getting faster or slower, which it hasn't really drastically done a lot.
Right. Right.
But I do last 5 years to adjust for those things. Because like I said, like the efficiencies, not in just Duke and everybody at the highest level at least, are very up right now. So in 2 years from now, if that holds, the trapezoid will move up a little bit, if that makes sense. So
right, yeah, that makes total sense. Okay, so getting into actual futures odds, of course, you can go over to pinnacle.com/inplay live to bet the futures for this tournament that's upcoming. Obviously, we're sitting here in conference week, so we may see some odds changes. Duke is the favorite. The best line out there is around 4.25 or plus 325 for them to win it all. If we go down the list, the highest or the lowest paying team, so the shortest odds that isn't in the trapezoid, is Alabama. You already brought them up. They said they scared you. Before you said that, I was going to ask, do you think they have a shot? I think you already answered it.
Yeah, I can't say they don't, because like they beat top level teams. They beat Houston, they beat Auburn. Like they have showed pretty glaring holes where I think that they'll drop at some point in a tournament setting. But you saw last year how hot they got, and like when they're on, they're just freaking on. Like it's tough to stop. I was down in Tuscaloosa a couple weeks ago and like watched them live. You get that feel. They have so much talent and depth on their team. Like it's tough to say they have 0% chance. I won't say that, because they are good and they could definitely break it.
Right. Well, it's interesting too, because their ability to score sometimes mirrors a little bit more of an NBA style game, where you say the first look's the best look with the pull up threes, and those are really hard to guard. Right. So Alabama's sitting at 12.0 or plus 1100. I want to keep going through the odds here, because now we're getting into teams in the trapezoid that start to have a really appealing payout. So Tennessee's plus 1600 or 17.0. Do you think they could get it done?
I have no trust in them winning a title. They haven't been able to crack into the Final Four, and Rick Barnes has not been able to get to that level, even with Dalton Connect, when their offense was at the best it's been in so long in their crazy style. They've also have shown glaring holes in the last couple of years as a system in their team, and I don't have confidence that they can win a national title now.
Okay. So that's two teams in the Trapezoid of Excellence that have been thrown under the bus
eliminated
here. Michigan State is the next shortest odds sitting outside the trapezoid, but as you can see, the roof of roof of the, what do you call that thing? It's touching the line.
Spartan helmet.
Do we consider them?
No, it's the data point is I think a little beneath it technically. So
right, the center. Okay.
Yeah.
So do you think they have a shot? They're 21.0 or plus 2,000.
I won't say a 0% chance. I lean no, because a team at their outside shooting level has never won the national title for good reason. And there have been so many games where you're like, oh, their offense looks rough right now. And I actually think their offensive rating and things like that is not ideal for historical metrics and just in general.
They're a terrible 3-point team, right?
Awful. They shoot like 30%, but what I will give them is in the last 5 games, they're shooting like 34, 35%, which is not great still, but it's not awful. And they're shooting the ball better, finding better looks. And Jace Richardson has been incredible in being that guy. But I would say, I won't say a 0% chance, but I would say no if I had to.
Okay, good to know. And then now we're getting into the longest odds inside of the trapezoid, which is like, it's exciting, right? If you're betting and you're like, oh, Duke is the favorite, I don't want to bet on them. I want a really big payout. We're looking now at Texas Tech 31-1, and Maryland you already touched on, so we don't need to go there, but 41-1 for Maryland. Those two teams are kind of exciting. Now in the bottom left, help us out. I actually don't recognize the logo, and it is covered.
St. Mary's.
Oh, that's St. Mary's. Okay, so I'll just bring their odds up here before if I can even find them.
They're not going to win. Don't worry.
Well, I still want to see what.
Also,
okay, you go ahead. I gotta find.
You're good.
You're gonna be scrolling a while there, Pace. You go down the list.
I don't know where.
St. Mary's is whoa. What is that? Plus 10,000.
They're not going to win. Don't worry about it.
Sound about right.
Gonzaga is also behind Florida. Gonzaga is up there too. I don't know if you guys noticed that.
Oh no, I didn't see that. Okay, and then I'll search them as well. I didn't. That's important. So yeah, thanks for saying that.
They're snuck in there right with Florida, but
they're right behind Florida. Right. Okay. Yeah.
51 or plus 5,000 for Gonzaga. So those are the long odds inside the trapezoid. So do any of these long odds? Do you think they can make a run? Do they have a shot?
Oh, a run for sure. There are two teams who have always manipulated metrics, unintentionally manipulated metrics by dominating teams throughout the WCC play. Even though Gonzaga has been very shaky this year, I think that they both could. I think Gonzaga they're always good. First of all, I like their team a lot before the season. Even now, I still like them a little bit. I want to see their seeding. I think they could be more dangerous than St. Mary's. St. Mary's plays the same system they always have. They're very, very good at it, but they have never made a Sweet 16 with Randy Bennett. They're in the tournament every single year. They can never crack that code. This would be the year with the right setup, but at what point do you just say they're just not? It's just not going to happen.
Right, that's fair. Yeah. Well, I mean, they're just from a betting standpoint. There's people that have said you just take the underdog in every single round of March Madness, and you're going to make money doing it. And people have tracked that year in, year out. And I think last year actually became really difficult for a lot of people. They got hit pretty hard doing that. But you can go through and look at some of these teams to make the Sweet 16, to make the Elite Eight, to make the Final Four. And yeah, some of these teams like St. Mary's have long odds, even for that stuff. So maybe that can help guide some people with their decision making. Like you said, this is adaptability, right? So they're going to play better against any set of teams than other teams will be able to.
Yeah, and they are on that slower end, St. Mary's, at least in Gonzaga on the faster. But like I said, St. Mary's in that range of low ceiling teams in the tournament. I know their net rating is high, but don't let it deceive you like it always does.
Right. So Pace, just remind me again, what were the odds for Gonzaga and what were the odds for Florida?
Gonzaga is 51 to win it all.
Okay.
And Florida is 8-1, 8.0.
8.0. Okay. And Ryan, Florida was your pick if you weren't to take Duke.
Probably, yeah.
So maybe some value on Florida at 8-1. But potentially there, right? Hey, Pace, what do you think?
Well, I'm anti-SEC now.
Oh, geez.
I don't want anything to do with them.
Hey, you're not supposed to let past bias influence, your decisions now.
Yeah.
Let's move on then. If we're looking outside the trapezoid here, where would we be looking for a potential winner if you were to go outside? I know you've already brought up Alabama. You're concerned Alabama could break the trapezoid streak. Anyone else in that area? Kentucky, Illinois, any of these teams?
I look at teams. I'm like, okay, at some point in the year, have you shown us that you could be better than anybody, any top team, whatever? The only team I see that with is Iowa State.
And where are they? Oh, they're right over here.
Maui.
Right over here.
Yeah,
okay, just outside the trapezoid.
They played Auburn back in November in Maui. They were up by 15, and they slipped up a couple of times and ended up losing on a last-second tip-in from Janiyah Broome. They looked, and Auburn is the best team in the country for basically the entire season, and they were then, and Iowa State was kicking their ass, basically. So they have had injury issues the last month and a half. They've had skids because of that. They've had hot and cold streaks, so I don't love that. But like I said, they showed us earlier in the year that they can be the nation's best team, and they can at least beat the nation's best team. So I like that about them. They're playing a little faster than they usually have offensively, and their offense is better because of it. That continuity has kind of settled in last year. Keyshawn Gilbert, Curtis Jones, they had a lot of transfers and stuff like that. Now those guys are in their second year at the program. Taman Lipsey's been there for a while. They have depth in the front court. They have a lot of experience. They play an incredible style. So if I was looking beyond it for longer odds, I'd go with Iowa State. Like I said, also that they have been hot and cold, and I don't love that. But they're one of those teams I'm watching this week in the Big 12 tournament to be like, show me something, and then I can get on board.
Okay. Anyone else that you'd look at? I know you obviously Iowa State, Alabama. Anyone else out here? Is it just kind of like, you don't like any of it?
To win a national championship, no, definitely not. But there are obviously teams that I think can make runs that are all over the place. So.
Some Final Four potential candidates outside this trapezoid?
Oh yeah, 100%. 100%. I can name 6, 7, 8, 9 different teams that are there. Like, I don't know, like New Mexico, I think is dangerous. I think you got to look at teams like UC San Diego. I think Texas A&M could make a run. I don't know how far because they're just like reckless at times and stuff like that. But there are a few teams for sure. Missouri, Louisville have been good, so it's tough to count out anybody.
Right. Okay. I'm going to leave the trapezoid up just so people can really sort of look at it and point out teams and that kind of thing while we sort of move on from it, because I want to ask you about some of the other metrics that you look at, Ryan, which are 3-point percentage and turnovers. I know you sort of create similar graphs for those sides of things. Let's talk 3-point teams. Who out there is a hot 3-point team? I think you just mentioned New Mexico. Were they one of the better 3-point teams out there?
I know they can shoot it well. That's kind of always been part of their bread and butter. I look at 3-point shooting as like people get caught up in it a lot.
Okay.
I use it also, of course, and I consider it like I do consider all things. But I think having a floor of 3-point shooting is what I look for, right? Like UConn wasn't like the best 3-point shooting team in the country the last couple of years, but they were good and they were good enough. And you can see that with teams throughout history and stuff. But there are also teams like I think Villanova, which I forget which year they went to the Final Four. They were an elite shooting team, and there are teams that will do that, but there are teams that don't shoot the ball that well. That will go further and stuff like that. So I think 3-point shooting 4 as a floor, and then 3-point defense I think is a big factor also. Can you defend the 3 really well? Because a lot of teams, because of analytics, rely on the 3 so much. So if you defend the 3 at such a high level, then you're going to be able to take someone out of their game like that, and then all of a sudden you could be doing some damage right there. So
okay, and then the other one, turnovers. I know you look at the turnover game, and I know that anybody who's watched college basketball to any kind of extent knows that, the way that these players handle the ball and take care of the ball can change a game completely. We see all sorts of kind of boneheaded things, perhaps, that you might not see in the NBA happen in college. And a lot of it comes down to ball control, possession, and just, hanging on to the ball. And inbounding the ball. Inbounding the ball can be, some teams it can be a complete nightmare for some teams when it comes to inbounding the ball. So talk to me about what you look at when you look at turnovers and kind of what teams control the ball the best.
Yeah. One thing I always look at is if you turn the ball over a lot as a high seed. Michigan is the key example this year, and I think everybody's going to be in on picking against Michigan very early on, but for good reason. They're terrifying to pick against or to pick with and stuff and support them because they turn the ball over at an astronomically alarming rate. And as a team that's going to be meant to win their games and they're going to be favorites, that's not good. And they're going to be they could be put in a situation right away against teams like McNeese and even later on in St. John's and Marquette and UC San Diego and teams like that just are blisteringly good turnover teams. Iowa State is good. I think Drake is up there. I always remember New Mexico is up there, Ole Miss. But turnover margin is great. Like you said, it's like in the college game especially. And I think a lot of it is, yes, quality is lower than the NBA per se. So you're going to have more mistakes. And they're younger and whatever, but there also is more reliance on their coaching staff and the system that they have in place. So there are certain offensive systems that will turn the ball over less and more, and certain defensive systems like Houston's that force a lot of turnovers, but there's also certain defensive systems like Creighton who don't force a lot of turnovers. And so it's kind of a game right there. But I think it's a very good way, one of my favorite metrics and basic stats to look at. I think it's a great one.
Right. Pace. I was just as he was talking about, I was thinking about. I think it was maybe Purdue 2 years ago where we as a team at In Play Live were just watching them turn the ball over again and again and just become totally susceptible to the full court press. Am I remembering that correct?
Yeah, it was the year before they won it all.
Right.
They were a huge favorite. They got upset in the second round, I think.
Yeah.
Might have been the first round.
Yeah.
They lost to St. Peter's in the Sweet 16 a few years ago, and then they lost to FDU, the 16 seed 2 years ago, I think.
Yeah, it was the 16 seed. It was the when they lost as to the 16 seed, they couldn't handle the press at all, and they kept turning the ball over. And then as soon as they figured that out, it was smooth sailing for them. But yeah, it's actually crazy when you watch the end of a college basketball game where they go, we have to press to win. And you watch team after team break the press and score the easiest points imaginable, because obviously there's a mismatch out there if you double team the person with the ball, and they can get down the court with an odd man rush. Obviously with no goalie in the net, you just lay it in, right? And then the teams that can't handle it, and what an impact it can have on their game. It's truly remarkable to watch. One of the things that's tricky about this time of year is that the teams may have not really faced it yet. So you have a team who has the lead, who is comfortable having leads and has done well with it all season long, that hasn't faced the intensity of a tournament level press. And they don't get to, as bettors too, we don't get to see it again. It was like, we're watching it now, there it is, and then that team's gone and it's over. And you go, okay, we can't even potentially capitalize that on the next opportunity because the season's done and it's an entirely new system and group of players next year. So I've found that always really interesting, where you just see it unfold in real time and you're like, well, this is how it is. We got to take this one in the chin, or we're on the right side of this one. However it goes from there. But yeah, certainly there are teams that simply cannot handle that press.
Ryan, you mentioned coaching, and Pace. I think that has so much to do with it, as Ryan kind of mentioned there. Ryan, who are the best coach teams in the league?
I think best coaches and best coached teams are different.
Sure, questions. Absolutely. I can totally understand that too. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. It's and that's the truth, because I think Tom Izzo is a good example of Michigan State. They kind of hit both those parts. I think Iowa State with TJ Otzelberger and Houston with Kelvin Sampson are 100% up there, but then Shire with Duke also, because those teams and systems Houston could win with he could pick up people off the street, Kelvin Sampson, and they would win 30 games in the year. It's ridiculous. But then there are teams like Auburn who have Bruce Pearl's a good coach. I'm not trying to take away from him at all. But Alabama, they have so much talent and ability, and they're going to be good into some level no matter what. You need a good coach to win, because Arkansas shows that they've been better as of late, I guess. But you put Bruce Pearl or Nate Oates with Arkansas's roster, and I guarantee they'd be better than Arkansas is right now. But I'd say those few teams I mentioned are probably the best well set up. So
right. Okay. We've taken a lot of your time, Ryan, but before we let you go, I want to sort of perhaps throw a bit of an impossible question at you, because we can't really kind of determine this. The selection Sunday hasn't rolled around yet. We don't know what the brackets look like or anything like that. But if you had to sort of go and pick a Final Four or even an Elite Eight at this point, where would you go? And would it be all bracket teams? And I guess where would you go outside the bracket here, or outside the trapezoid?
I'll always tell everybody that you need to see the bracket for matchups and runs, and I need to see it this week. Of course, obviously. I would find it hard to not take Duke and Florida, who I've already mentioned that I like a lot, into the Final Four. It's tough. I think I like teams like Iowa State, Texas Tech, and Maryland. Maybe one of them, maybe two of them, but I'd also probably still consider Auburn and Houston also. And it depends. Michigan State I like also, but if I had to take one to answer your question, because I'll play the part here, Duke, Florida, Iowa State, Texas Tech.
Iowa State and Texas Tech.
Wow.
All right, so Iowa State, the one team outside the trapezoid that you would potentially put in a Final Four.
Yeah, and I wouldn't even look at the trap. I don't live and die by the trapezoid. To pick a national champion, I will make sure they're in there, but I won't be I have to pick every team in there. I am going to have the trapezoid make its own bracket this year, so that when it beats me and beats everybody, I'm like, oh god, of course.
Well, on that note, I think it's important to bring up we do our March Madness bracket at In Play Live every single year. A lot of fun. We actually added a metric in, Ryan. I don't know how familiar you are with different bracket formats, but you can have it where, underdogs give you more points, seed rankings give you more or less points. We added one thing this year we didn't have last year. That is a bonus team. So it's a team essentially that if they win, you get more points. But if you pick your bonus team to be a 1 seed, you only get 1 win times 1 for their seed. Right. But if the bonus team is a 16 seed and you get a win from them, that's going to be a bonus 16 points. So you multiply the number of wins by the seed number to get an overall bonus, right? So are you incentivized to take Duke there? Well, if they win, sure. But at the same time, if you could have snagged an 8 seed that grabbed 2 wins, you're going to get way more bonus points than if Duke wins the whole thing and you pick them as your bonus team. But anyways, the reason why I bring this up is because, Ryan, you're going to be joining our bracket this year, which is really exciting. So he really gets to show us if he can put his trapezoid where his mouth is, shall we say. But you were saying, hey, I'm going to do an all trapezoid. Sorry. You're saying you're going to do an all trapezoid bracket. You could definitely do that with us. And I'm sure there's some viewers here that will probably end up doing the same. So you might not be hugely differentiated.
There might be some hosts here doing the same.
People copy my bracket every year, and I tell them before I post it.
Please don't, right?
I'm telling you, you are going to lose. Like, you are going to lose. But they don't listen.
Yeah.
Well,
but anyways, you can play alongside Ryan, myself, and Shane in this year's bracket. So if anyone needs the details of that, you can always just shoot us a DM on any of our socials or comment below. Yeah. But gonna be another great year of March Madness fun and brackets. And if you guys are feeling discouraged this time of year because your bracket loses, don't worry. Everyone's bracket loses.
Who cares?
Everyone's bracket's losing. And Pace, you brought up the Pinnacle odds for who's going to win it all, and you went through the list there. But only a few weeks left here in March, and that's when the first quarter of the Pinnacle contest comes to an end, right?
Absolutely. So you just have to make a $10 wager. You have to be a part of our free Discord, and you're actually going to be sending Raj the DM now, not Sabrina. Sabrina has moved on from the team. Really excited for her to be taking on a new opportunity. But for now, you'd be DMing at Raj on our server. So a little change up from the previous information there. So I said it on this week's weekly primer, but I'll say it again. Huge thank you and shout out to Sabrina for her couple years of service with In Play Live.
Oh, big shout out, Sabrina. Thank you for everything that you did for In Play Live and for this podcast specifically for Behind the Lines.
Yeah,
Sabrina's
big time. She's probably the one that connected with Ryan. So there you go.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So Sabrina, thank you so much for everything that you've done for us here on the show, and best of luck to whatever you're doing next. All right. Well, with that, Ryan Hammer, certified bracketologist, college hoops scientist. Dude, thanks so much for joining us again. Can you commit now to next year and us having you back again?
I think we did the same exact thing last year. I guess so. Yeah.
He's like, fuck,
he's like, sure, whatever. Love it. All right, buddy. Well, best of luck to you and your bracket making and throughout the tournament. And I can't wait to put it all together. But to you, Pace, bettors around the world, have a great March Madness. Until next week, keep beating those books.
Before we sign off, Shane, Ryan's been flicking around this ball in his hand the whole episode, so he's definitely got like ADHD or something like that. And I see the hoop behind us. Can you give us one shot?
Oh, let's go. All on the line. Oh, break.
Man, I thought for sure that was good.
All right. All right, guys.
Cheers.
Take it easy, guys.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Behind the Lines. Remember to like, download, and subscribe. We are on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and everywhere you get your podcasts. Have a betting story or want to be featured on our podcast? Drop a note in the comments below. And if you want to join In Play Live, use promo code Behind the Lines.